Hello, I am Leslie Penelope, and this is Build a Romantasy Magic System with me. Welcome. I realize I didn't do my lighting right, but we won't worry about it. Hopefully you can see me. So the purpose of this series is to carve out some time for me to talk about and think about and work on this side project that I have. And thought I would do it in public to give myself accountability and to just think through some of the ways that we go about creating romantasy projects. Now, tonight's stream will probably be shorter than the others, just because daylight savings time has kind of got me feeling crazy and exhausted. Um, Welcome, read, love, listen. Perfect, because the WP is calling. Is romantasy with sci-fi elements? Excellent. Yeah, I think that with the popularity of romantasy, more people are either doing it or digging up, manuscripts that they were going to work on and thinking about it more, which is always really cool. So tonight I wanted to talk about magic systems and how we're incorporating magic into the fantasy world, how that relates to the romance of it all, and just sort of talk through some ideas. So if you want to let me know in the chat what your favorite magic systems are, or what you really like in a magic system. Hello, Itori. How are you? I sometimes I get asked this question, what are my favorite magic systems? And I draw a blank. But the one that's the most memorable is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor, which I really need to reread because it's been many years since I've read it. And what I remember about the magic system was that it really impacted me a lot. And it was unusual and it was interesting. Hi, Ellie. How are you doing? So yeah, let me know, do you have a favorite magic system and what makes, in your mind, a good magic system? There's some things that I definitely think about when I'm creating my own. And I think the things that you want to do are probably the things that you like. I like a slightly harder magic as opposed to hard magic versus soft magic, where there's more rules. You can sort of understand how it works. You get a feel for things it can do, things it can't do. It's not just so flexible that it's more, I guess, hand wavy. But some people like a softer magic system, and it's just personal preference. And other things, I like to connect it. So when I think about magic systems, there's a couple of things that I feel like if you can get them in and make your magic system like really connect and really relate with the character and the story and the stakes, then it's even better, as opposed to it just being a system that exists on its own that has nothing to do with anything else in the story. So, like, how can your magic system reveal character or increase the stakes, deepen the conflict, or resonate with the theme? Like, every element of the story should kind of be doing multiple things. So that's the way I think about it. So how can your magic system be doing double duty, like not just be something cool that makes your story a fantasy, but like what else can it be doing? How can it reveal character? Can it make your conflict all the worse for the characters? How do you make things worse with the magic system? Like a more realistic but still magical system? Yeah, I think I fall in that vein too. It sounds like that's like a slightly harder, more, well, it depends on what you mean by realistic. Like they can do real things, like they can affect, you know, sometimes I'm doing a story now. I'm a different story. And my agent was kind of like, is this magic or is this just like superpowers? And for me, there is a difference in the collective imagination. We don't think of superpowers necessarily as magic. A lot of times they can be like science based, like Peter Parker. Yeah, so you're saying almost like science. So more of a like Spider-Man bit by a radioactive spider where you can call it sciency. And I think that I like that too. I think that's really cool. It's just, what is the line between a superpower and a magical power? And is it the source? Is it if they can actually the end function is the same? Is it just, how they got those powers? Or is it explained versus not being explained? Is it someone's an alien, like they're mutants? Mutants are more sciencey. But yeah, so if they, and that can go to the theme of your story, like if you are doing a more realistic science-based magic system, then I would assume that your story is a little grittier. You're probably in a heightened reality world as opposed to more of a lofty fantasy-ish world. I mean, they're all fantasy, but hopefully you know what I mean. And so tone, that's another thing to think about. How does the magic system affect the tone of your story? And like what if you think about the colors on your cover, because we have covers are supposed to represent what the reader is going to get when they open the book. And so are you dealing with something that is darker, grittier, or is it brighter? Is it more fairy tale-ish? You think of a fairy tale system, that is not a hard magic system. It's a soft magic system where fairy godmothers are waving wands and turning pumpkins into carriages. And how does that work? What are the rules of that magic system? There are none, really. They can sort of just be what you need them to be. And for some stories, that's good. So the story that I'm working on, it's based in a fairy tale, but I don't want to do like soft fairy tale magic. I really do want to come up with some kind of harder magic system. So I have in the Story Bible guide, there is a section on magic systems. And I was going to go over this, and then in the software Plotter, which I was using for the first part of the series, it also has a template for magic systems, which has a lot of stuff in it. So let's see if I can make this big. Okay, so this is a page out of the Story Bible guide, which you can download. I think the download's in the chat, but in the description. But it's kind of small in here. But so for magic system, figure out how it's important to the story. So it has the ability to both cause and solve conflicts, and for it to be believable to the reader, I think it should be well thought out. And this is obviously a harder system. If you're doing a very soft system, you can skip some of these steps, but I think it's probably worth thinking about some of them. Some of this I got from Holly Black. I think she did a talk somewhere where she listed her elements of a magic system, and then I added some on that I thought were relevant too. So often a magic system will have a name, not always, but like I've done both in my first series, Earthsinger Chronicles. The magic is called, there's Earth Song, and then there's the opposite. So Earth Song is like life magic. There's Nether Song, which is death magic, and then there was Amalgam, which was combination of the two plus objects. So I had 3 different types of magic systems in that series. But then with my most recent book, Monsters We Defy, it doesn't have a name. It's just you can call in spirits, and some people can see ghosts. There are rules to it, but it's based off of a realistic, like actual African American folk magic, things that people actually practice and believe in, and that have cultural roots. So it doesn't have a name, even though in real life you would call it like hoodoo or conjure. Since I was doing an offshoot of that, I mean, people talk about hoodoo in the book, but they don't call this specific thing. Maybe they do, but I didn't call it that. I let the characters kind of decide what it was called. So you can choose whether or not your magic has a name if it needs to. Then the type, active or passive. Active is like you have to do something. You have to do a spell. You have to make a hand gesture. You have to have some sort of conscious thing that you're doing. Whereas passive magic is it just flows out of you. You walk by the flowers and they die, or something. Or you, what was it? Like if you touch something on purpose, is that active or passive? But I sort of think if you're not really trying, if everything you touch, if you're either grows or dies when you touch it, that's more of a passive thing because you don't have to enact anything. It's just coming out of you, whether you like it or not. Magic should also have some kind of source. Your source is generally either internal or external. So you can be born with the magic, or it can be bestowed upon you, but it is something that is intrinsic to yourself, as opposed to requiring a cauldron or a wand or a gem or a talisman or something, which would be completely external. Then there's some, you can combine the two. Like I'm thinking of Mistborn, where you actually have to ingest something. From what I recall, I guess it's kind of external, but then it goes internal because you have to ingest the metal. But it's not, I don't remember in Mistborn, does anyone know if they were born with that? It's been a while since I read it. And so you can conceivably combine active and passive, but I'm sure you can combine all of these things to make something even more unique and different. This is amazing because it can be hard to make the rules for magic systems. I have magic and text, so this list could help with ensuring it's realistic and not all over the place. Yes, that is why I used the list and came up with it. So it's because I like to have a good rule, some boundaries. Boundaries help with the creativity. It can help when you're using magic to solve a problem, and it's like so it doesn't feel Deus Ex Machina, like, oh, and all of a sudden the magic did it. Well, you have to set that up, whether you do it in the first pass or your fifth draft. So yeah, having these boundaries is good. I tend to like internal magic. I think just as a personal preference when I'm writing, when I'm reading, what other people do, if they do it well, it works. But most of my magic systems have been internal. Yeah, not to have the luck of it just happens. Sometimes that can feel like a cheat sometimes. I mean, I'm sure it can be done well, but like I often think that it makes it feel like it wasn't part of the plan. And whether or not you discovered it later as the writer, the idea is for the reader to believe that you knew all of this all along and you had very carefully planned it. And sometimes we also, as writers, have happy accidents. The other part, technique. So it's broken down into thought, speech, gesture, and material, or any combination of these. So, okay, thinking magic, you just have to, like, I think Earth Song in my first series was just basically you think about it, you try really hard, and you do things. Speech, you have to actually say a spell or use specific words in a specific language. That's obviously very common. All these are actually really common. Gesture, I think about what was the Lee Bardugo show, like Shadow and Bone in those books. They're always and also like Doctor Strange, he always has to do certain motions and gestures, and then materials, which would be your cauldron. Like you have to get Eye of Newt and whatever materials and sprinkle them together and drink this potion. And you can have magic systems that obviously combine them. So it is a material that requires a spell, and then you have to think and do a gesture. Like that's probably too much, but maybe two at a time. I mean, I'm sure people have done all of these things, and you kind of have to think, okay, what do all of these things mean? Like, why is it this way? It's always more interesting, in my opinion, when there's reasons. So there's so many magic systems that require spells and some kind of speech, and maybe it's in an arcane language or a magical language. Often it's based on Latin, but you know, as people as more people are telling stories from more diverse backgrounds, we're getting away from just, your traditional Latin incantations or something. And so if you're thinking about, okay, this it's speech, it's where did this spell come from? Who wrote it? Why is this language magic? How is it imbued with magic? Does that say anything about the origin of the culture? Magic is an important part of the world building. And I think that all world building should be connected ideally. So how this magic, the technique that you use to do the magic, what does it say about the world, the characters, the conflict, all of that? Range is how far does it work? Can you say a spell and it works 3,000 miles away, or is it like a 50-foot radius? How far? And then does your range depend on your strength, or is it like a fixed range? The effect is just, what does it do? The physical or mental or spiritual effects of the magic. And then the cost. What actually does it cost? Energy is a common cost. I've used that because it makes sense. Another magic system that I actually really liked was Naomi Novik's the Dark Academia books. The Last Graduate was maybe the third book. What is the name of the first book? Golden Enclaves, those books. It was a trilogy, and where magic was basically an economic system. And so you had the literal rich people were also wealthy in magic, and they stored it, and they had like banks of it, vaults essentially where that the members could draw from. And our main character was not rich. She was just all on her own. And she was constantly having to do push-ups and jog in place to build up enough magic to do things. Um, so that was actually really interesting. And because it was an economic system that had obviously this class implications, you have a magical class and caste system automatically because of the magic. In my opinion, that's an example of really good world building where you are talking about themes. Your theme is represented not just in the world building in, okay, the types of the regular economic systems that you would have that we are familiar with, but when it's also present in the magic system, it just reinforces everything and it makes everything feel even tighter and more connected. And so yeah, cost. There is, does it cost a memory? Does it cost a year of your life? Whatever the cost can be. And then the worse you make the cost, the more valuable the magic is, probably the more powerful it would be. Like if you're every time you do a spell, you lose a year of your life, then hopefully that magic is really worth it and you're going to use it judiciously. Or maybe it's worth a year of someone else's life, someone else that you love. There's all kinds of really cool ways you can go. Education is how do you learn this magic? Do you have to go to a special school? Do you have to become an apprentice? Is there a grimoire that you have to read? And first you have to learn the arcane language that the grimoire was written in. How do you learn to master it? Can you do it on your own? Are you born with the knowledge? Is it just passed down? The way that you set that up can have really interesting implications too for your world. You can do a class or caste system in that way too, where the knowledge of the magic is hoarded and only certain people get to learn it. And then we have all of our lovely magical academies that we're so fond of. Properties is sort of like effects, but yeah, especially like if you have objects that are needed, um, special texts, it goes with the materials and gestures, whatever the actual specifics of the things that are needed in order to have the magic work are the properties. And then we need to have some sort of limitations, ideally. So beyond cost, like range is one limitation, but can you do only one spell a day? Do you have to recharge your wand or whatever? Good magic, I think, has limitations because there are opportunities for conflict. There are opportunities to raise the stakes. If you're in a high stress situation and you need this special herb to, build your potion that you have to drink in order to make the magic happen, and someone's just burned it, or the villain has collected all of it and you have to break into their warehouse to get it in order to make the magic happen. There's, you could have the plot revolve around acquiring what you need to do the spell to get the thing that you want. And so there's lots of ways that magic can solve a problem, but it works best for the audience when you've set it up ahead of time. So I think that your ability to solve problems with magic is directly proportional to the audience's understanding of that magic. And that's Brandon Sanderson's first law, right? So setting it up, knowing for yourself what it is, and having it come in early. If you're in a situation where maybe you're not sure about plot things, you're not sure what's going to happen next in the story, work on the magic system a little, come up with some conflicts or some stakes that are very magic related and interweave them into it. Now, in a romantasy specifically, how does that affect the love story portion of it? Because we're trying to balance the fantasy aspects and the love story aspects as well. I want to show you Plotter also really quickly because there is another system, another magical template inside of Plotter. Okay, so this is a software plotter, and let's see. I don't like not understanding why certain things are necessary, and we don't learn until the character stumbles into an item or plant. Yeah. having it like figuring it out ahead of time solves that problem. So like in the character template of Plotter, you can add a template, and these are ones that come. You can do your own custom templates, and there is a magic blueprint. I think this is, yeah, it's based on the book Magic System Blueprint by C.R. Rowanson. And this gives you, I'll just load this up, a lot of some of the similar things, but goes into a bit more detail. Um, so name, type, effects, abilities, we talked about boundaries, sources, transference, the degree to which the magic can be acquired, lost, or transferred to others, which is interesting. It can be high or low. Prevalence, the degree to which it's widespread or commonplace. That's also important. Does everyone have magic, or does only a limited few people in your world have magic? That has big implications for your story. Naturalness, the degree to which the magic seems natural or normal for the setting. Ease of use, the degree to which it can be used safely and effectively. So is it extremely dangerous and you're taking your life in your hands whenever you brew this potion and or use this spell? Reliability, is it consistently producing the expected results? Also important. Balance, does it create power disparities between the characters? Some stories, the entire story is the power differential between people with magic and people without magic. And perception, how is it viewed by others? Is it good, evil, desirable? Like if you were telling a story in our current world and you had, witches, or maybe you go back to the witch trials when obviously witches were considered evil and they were burned or drowned or whatever. There's a myth about witches, like they weren't really burned, they were actually drowned. I can't remember. And then consistency, the degree to which the magic is consistent with the rest of the magic system. Uh, and we have plenty of beloved stories that have no consistency. I'm talking about you, Harry Potter. But, you can make anything work, I guess you can say that. Can your magic list also work to help create an alchemy system? Ooh, interesting. I haven't done alchemy before. Let's go back to this other list. You're struggling with an alchemy system. So alchemy is more about combining, it's very materials based. It is sort of like chemistry, but like magical chemistry. And I've actually been researching Gnosticism, which has some relationships to alchemy a bit. I think, yeah, I think you're thinking about, okay, what are the materials needed? There's special formulas and different, recipes, we can say, for creating alchemical results. And yeah, like what specifically are the struggles? If you think about it like chemistry, then I don't know your familiarity with chemistry. Mine is very small from 10th grade chemistry, but I would research chemistry and see, okay, how do chemists talk about what they do? How are these mixtures done? What are the effects? In chemistry class, you can mix certain things together and they'll explode in your face. So that could be a limitation or a cost or an effect. Maybe you want it to. It's just, yeah, I always think of alchemy like that. Now you can add on other elements to alchemy because sometimes in some worlds that are based on that, there's also an element of speech. There's, the actual ingredients mixed together in the proper quantities. And then in order to activate them, do you need something else? Or do you need some other element like a mineral, a stone, or a gem, or some other magical catalyst? So I would think about it as recipes and formulas and see if that helps at all. Another, I'm doing for this story shifters, and you are welcome. And I'm thinking about, I've set some stuff up in this short story that I'm going to continue in this world. And so depending on how your magic comes to you, I think, usually you have some core, just like a story, some spark, some core that you want to flesh out a little bit. And I think you world build magic in a similar way as you world build the rest of like a culture or a religion or a language. They're just different aspects of this world. And in certain stories, your magic system can be just as important and just as life-changing as a religion is. Any other questions about this? Okay. So yeah, my biggest things to take away, I think, would be, let me share this other screen. Okay. How can it reveal your character, increase the stakes, deepen the conflict, resonate with the theme, and it should be some kind of word here, realize or contribute to the tone? How about that? And you can say this list could apply to your setting. Um, it could apply to like any world building aspect, I think, but specifically magic systems. So if we're talking about a magic system revealing character, if a character, like that goes to what does a character do with the magic? How, if they have a lot of power, how can it not corrupt them? Or how, when they get more or less, what do they do with it? My first novel, Song of Blood and Stone, I start my main character, she has magic, but she's very weak. And so over the course of the series, she gets much more powerful. She gets incredibly powerful. And so we've already built her character. So hopefully we know and we can trust that she's a heroine. She's not a villain. I'm not turning her into a villain. But another version of that story could be like a person who was weak with magic gets a gift of incredible strength. And does that corrupt them? That's a whole story that reveals the character. Um, or if a character gets magic taken away, how does that affect them? What do they do with their abilities and how do they not misuse them? You can increase the stakes in lots of ways with your magic system. So building the story and the plot together as you're going back and forth, like as you're creating a magic system, as you're figuring out what it does and what its limitations and costs are. If you're hitting a roadblock with the plot and the story, how can you design the magic system to make that worse, make the conflict worse, or get them out of it, and then kind of go back and lay the groundwork, sow those seeds ahead of time so that the audience had some sort of foreshadowing that that was possible. And I talked about theme a bit before. I'm thinking about, I like to think about theme up front. A lot of writers don't, and that's fine because it's hard. Sometimes it can be hard to know your theme until the end, until you're done. But if you are the kind of writer who thinks about theme up front, then in a fantasy romance, how can the magic make the theme resonate? How does it support the idea that love conquers all? Like, what is there something in there that you can underscore or strengthen that will make the theme shine a little bit more? And then the tone. I keep going back to the TV show Pushing Daisies. And if you were here for Preptober at NaNoWriMo, we were talking about that. But I like that sort of whimsical tone. And even though the power of the main character in Pushing Daisies is that when he touches someone dead or a dead person or animal, they come back to life, or plant. They come back to life for 60 seconds. Well, they come back to life. Oh, you know what? I'm thinking of different things. Like when he touches the cherries, he makes a pie maker. They come back for more than 60 seconds. So I think it was only living beings. Oh, no. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm confused. I'm very tired. But there's the balance of the whimsy with the thing that he makes people come back from the dead. It's all about death. But the tone is so just whimsical, like happy and bright, the bright colors. Yeah, like how can you make your magic, if you wanted to tell a cozy fantasy, how do you make your magic whimsical? But with whimsy, there's often that thread of darkness that's there too, that kind of balances it out. And maybe the whimsy doesn't veer off into like being wacky, because there's a difference between whimsical and wacky. And without that thread of darkness, maybe that balance gets taken off. So if you wanted to do something that was necromancers, but make it whimsical, make it bright colors and pastels, but also dealing with death. And that's all tone. And so your tone of your magic can mix those things together. I think that could be an actually interesting thing to do. Cool. Does anyone have any other questions about this? I'm thinking about how to make, I'm having different groups of shifters. So wolf shifters, bears, birds, and cats of some kind in the story. And so it's not overt magic. It's like, okay, they change into animals, but are there other things that they do? Because we don't often, I mean, that's magical, but usually when you have shifter stories, the majority of them that I've read have been, there's no other magic other than the shifting, and then there's some rules that are associated with the shifting, whether you're going to go traditional werewolf and it's a full moon based thing, or wolf shifters in many romance novels where it's just at will, they can just turn into wolves. But it would be interesting, like in the short story that I'm expanding, I did set up something where the wolf shifters can communicate via the moon, and some kind of moon magic is at play. So if you're using things that are familiar to the audience, like wolves and moons, full moons, then for the other shifters, is there something that I can do with cats? I'm just thinking about my cats and like, okay, would be interesting if the house cat, if you do something that is very familiar to people who have house cats, like they're climbing up on things and like knocking things down. But like what kind of magic that can connect to something that is familiar and heighten it, and maybe be also unique and different. Because what we didn't necessarily talk about is how do you make your system unique? I think every person is going to have, it's coming from your brain. It's going to be unique as long as you're not directly copying someone else. But and also doing these things like tying it into your story so that it ties into the character and the conflict and the stakes and all of that helps make it unique as well. So yeah, those are the things I wanted to share about the magic system. It's 8:30 for me, and although it feels like 9:30, somehow it actually feels like 11:30. So I'm losing my energy. But yeah, let me know if you have any other questions about building magic systems. I really still have to think mine through and figure out what I want to do. I do want to brainstorm the aspects of the shifters a little more. Would you classify a curse where the only magic that can break the spell is using tech, elemental, and dark magic? Would this be alchemy? Interesting. I don't necessarily think of that as alchemy, but I don't know. Maybe my view of alchemy is not expansive. I think it's interesting. So it's a curse, and you have to use tech, elemental magic, and dark magic. You have to combine them together to, I mean, it's a form. Anytime you're combining multiple things, I guess you could have that be a form of alchemy. I do think of alchemy as more like you're in that laboratory with the beakers and the Bunsen burners, but that could just be a stereotype, and you can call it alchemy and just make it your own when you are. I love combining tech and magic. I think that's very cool. And then yeah, the elemental and the dark magic. If you wanted to name it something like tech alchemy or create your own naming system for it to incorporate that. And it's a good example of taking the familiar and making it your own by combining unusual aspects when you're doing it. So semi-alchemy, yeah. Curse magic, that's also cool. It's because yeah, you're combining the curse also. I think that sounds really neat. And I think it could be a type of alchemy, but I think calling it curse magic is also sounds very cool to me. Like I would lean into that because curses are always interesting, and the things that you have to do to break them are always interesting, and you have a lot of story fodder there. Cool. I think next week I'm going to come back and talk more about cultures and developing culture and some of the other world building things. Probably just culture. We'll see what happens. Oh, explain moon magic more? I have a very limited idea of it yet. I haven't fleshed it out yet. In the short story I wrote, it was basically a character comes from a magical world to, let's call it our world, like a version of our world where there is no magic. And she's going to, if she stays too long, she'd lose her magic. So she has to communicate with her. She's a soldier, so her captain. And since she is a wolf shifter, there's a way that she can sort of think of the moon as being able to be like a conduit or like a Wi-Fi connection, but in its internal magic. So she can sort of, when the moon is out, when it's showing and it's visible to her, there's a way that the magic that she naturally has can bridge the gap between worlds via the moon, so she can communicate. That is what I've been playing with, and I need to kind of tease it out and see, does it do other things? You know, in this story, traveling between the worlds isn't super common, so I think it needs to, maybe that's just how they communicate in their own world, and it doesn't have to be only through across the different worlds. And certain stages give certain powers. That could be interesting. I mean, you have to wait a whole month to be able to do certain things if you're at the wrong phase. Those are good limitations to have. So, I think I don't know if I say specifically it was a full moon, but I do say that the moon was out and she was able to communicate with the person in the other world. So yeah, forcing you to wait until the next waxing gibbous moon, or I don't know anything about moons phases, but would be a good limitation, and that could be very interesting. And you could have good conflict, like if you miss it, or if someone prevents you, like a character needs this phase of the moon and is captured and isn't able to do the thing. There's so many ways that it could go. But yeah, I would probably just start brainstorming ideas like that. Like, is it stage related? Do the clouds, do you have to have line of sight? Does cloud cover matter? There's so many people who talk about full moons and their power, and what does that actually mean? I would probably even research real cultural beliefs about the moon across the world and like take little pieces and mash them together. And then maybe if I want to have a different magic system for my other kinds of shifters, all right, what's a thing that we think about bears? What is a thing that we think, what would birds need? Do birds use the sun or the wind or some other elemental power? And is that where their magic is aligned with? Maybe it doesn't come from there, but it's give them some sort of elemental or geographical or weather related thing that their powers are aligned to. I think that could be fun too. And then it could all relate to culture. So if you have moon magic, then you're decorating your home with, pictures of different moon phases, or you have like moon tattoos, and how does it express itself culturally when that is the type of magic that you are born with and you use? That's sort of where my mind goes with those kinds of things. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for showing up, and I appreciate you being here. I plan to be here next Monday at 8, hopefully more awake. Hopefully with like 7 days of daylight savings time, sleep under my belt. But yeah, I will see y'all next time. And if you are interested in the reminders for when the live streams happen, you can see my screen. So I was going to put it in the chat, but it's myimaginaryfriends.net/live. And I'll put that. I only open that to copy and paste the link. Cool. So thanks a lot, y'all. And I'll see you next week, hopefully. Good night.